Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the Giulio Cesare. I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly, you can sue me if I didn't. It's of course the upcoming Tier 5 Italian battleship. Now this battleship used to be we were able to preview this ship earlier, and it had an absolutely ridiculous cruiser dispersion on it. So what they've done in this updated version of the ship is that they have nerfed the dispersion significantly to pretty much New York levels of dispersion, but they have given it 1.9 sigma. Now sigma is one of the factors that determine how much vertical dispersion you have, meaning if someone is angled towards you, you still have pretty damn bad dispersion because, well, your horizontal dispersion, let's say, for example, we shoot this Kirov, you see how he's angled, nose in towards me and making a small target? When I try to shoot him, the horizontal dispersion, meaning how wide my shells can go, is pretty much all over the place. And that's intended. However, my horizontal dispersion is much tighter than many of its competitors thanks to the 1.9 sigma. And this is a very important thing when it comes to punishing broadsides. And I actually quite like this change. I like this approach, even though I thought it was a bit of a roundabout way of nerfing this ship. But what it means is that people who angle well against the Giulio Cesare won't really consider it that scary of a ship. But people who give broadside and allow you to use that sigma, well, they can be punished quite heavily. And I actually quite like that. It's a fundamental case where playing well against the ship allows you to avoid too much punishment, and that kind of game design is always going to get a big thumbs up for me because there's too much face roll stupidity going on right now with the Royal Navy line. So any sort of line that encourages skilled gameplay or punishes bad and rewards good is always going to get a thumbs up for me. Now you saw some planes were hovering around in my AA, and while this ship does have better AA than much of its Tier 5 competition, it's still Tier 5 battleship AA. Oh, you see that? Oh, the goodbye, poor Dana. Yeah, while it still has better dispersion than many of the Tier 5 battleship comparison or competition, it still isn't good anti-air. You're still not going to shoot down anything. If someone wants to strike you, you're not really going to do much, and usually it gets much worse as the game goes on because, well, you get HE spammed by Royal Navy battleships or just in general, and you lose whatever small AA you had to begin with. So don't expect to be any sort of AA powerhouse. This is no Texas, and maybe if you fully spec for it, you might get something out of it, but ultimately it's not going to be useful. What is quite good on this ship is the concealment though. 11.4 km concealment means that it's very stealthy for Tier 5. Usually that kind of concealment can't be reached until Tier 8 battleships when they can slot the module and fully spec into it. But you can still be extremely stealthy. As you can see the way I disappear from vision every time I fire. Now, another thing though is of course the armor. You saw that I just took 45k damage, sorry, not 45, 15k damage from an Arkansas beta that shot me. And that is pretty much quite a significant weakness of this thing, is that it's not that well armored. In fact, it's probably among the least armored Tier 5s. And, well, 15k doesn't sound like much perhaps, but you gotta consider the ship only has 45k health. So 15k is a third of your health gone. So you actually have to use that concealment, and you do have to angle quite actively because if you do get broadside, you don't really have too much armor to save you, and you can get punished quite heavily. So that is of course a good thing. It needs to have weaknesses because overall, because of this dispersion and because of the concealment, it is a very nasty threat. The guns are only 320mm guns, which means they are quite small caliber, which means of course angling against the AP is quite strong. However, giving broadside, you can punish it heavily. In fact, since I have AP loaded here, you note that I'm not shooting yet, I'm holding my fire. Because I already know that even though it's just a Congo, angling like that will reduce my damage massively. So I use my stealth to stay undetected until he turns and gives me broadside, and only then do I fire. And then we of course get rewarded also with a lot of damage. So this ship does greatly scale depending on how well you play it, which is something I quite like. The HE is, in my opinion, still a bit too high on the fire chance. The HE alpha isn't that bad at 4.8k. You got to remember that this ship does have a faster reload, which means that whenever you shoot, well, we can show it here, we're shooting Clemson. We're talking, what, 28 seconds? Well, actually, that might be AR kicking in a bit. So, but it still has the pretty much nice reload that you expect from higher tier battleships instead of New York's 34.3 seconds. And combine that with the fact that it has a 35% fire chance means that, and 10 guns, means that it's still a very, very nasty fire starter. And I personally don't really think it needs 35% fire chance. I mean, New York has what, 25? Koenig has what, 22? I think there's something along those values are their base fire chances. So this doesn't really need 35% in my opinion. I mean, we already have one Iron Duke that's enough of a nightmare for everyone. We don't need more HE spamming battleships. So in my opinion, they could easily tune down this HE chance from 35 to 30%, and the ship would still be excellent, but it would be less encouraging of the brain dead HE spam that we will no doubt be seeing, because once the average player realizes that the 35% fire chance exists, they're going to be shooting a lot more HE, and it's going to be quite brain dead gameplay and so forth. And HE, in my opinion, HE on a battleship, in my opinion, should always be situational. When a target angles against you, when you can't get that broadside, that's when you use HE. It shouldn't be the get-go ammunition that you use pretty much in all situations. That's bad design, and I really dislike that. Health-wise, I already mentioned 45k, which is quite low. I mean, Congo, for example, gets 54k, that's 9k more, so pretty significant differences there. The speed is quite nice, 27.1 knots, I think, speed. Comparison, Congo does 30, but Congo is, of course, a bit of a special case. But it doesn't feel like something like the New York that does 21 knots. This, of course, having this faster speed is extremely important when facing higher tiers. In fact, the combination of fast speed and high concealment is great when you're up against higher tiers, because it allows you to disengage when need be, heal up, and it makes you less prone to being HE burned to death by these higher tier cruisers and whatever battleships that might be spamming it. So very useful and very helpful in fighting high tiers. The fire chance, of course, is also very useful when fighting them. When you face angled battleships that are high tier, you're going to struggle to do too much damage, so having that absurd fire chance makes it very strong against them, and I would say, once again, a bit too strong. I don't think it needs 35%, I think it can easily be toned down to a 30% fire chance. This game doesn't need more HE spamming wargaming, we have quite enough of that as it is. Turret traverse is pretty damn great at 36 seconds, and this turret traverse is without expert marksman. So if you add expert marksman on top and buff it a bit more, you can probably get something like, what, 31-second turret traverse, which is starting to approach cruiser turret traverse. So very nimble, agile ship. The handling is also very good. The rudder shift is 13 seconds and the turning circle is 640. That brings it very close to the New York's 612.5 respectively. So a nimble, agile ship. It does have actually a citadel that does come up above the waterline, which is a bit of a rarity in battleships these days, but it does have a turtleback protecting it as well. So point blank, you're unlikely to eat any citadels, but at range, if you do get broadside, because of how elevated the citadel is, it does extend significantly above the waterline. At range, if you get broadside, I would say that this can probably be the subject to some really nasty, devastating strikes and citadels in general. So there are some quite some clear weaknesses. The AA I mentioned, well, you can see now I'm focus firing. These are only tier 5 planes. No, this is only a tier 5 plane, and if you're hoping that your AA is going to have some sort of value, especially later in the games, that's just not going to happen. I'm shooting that. You shoot down no planes really. This is tier 5, of course. Tier 6, tier 7, it gets even worse. I'm focus firing the torpedo bombers, and I'm going to start turning into them. At this point I kind of have to turn in because, well, I risk giving a lot of broadside, but I really do want to mitigate the incoming damage. One thing I've noticed with Giulio is it seems a bit wonky when shooting close range targets this time, especially DDs. When a DD rushes you, the dispersion seems to be a bit all over the place, but I don't know. It could be just bad RNG at the times, because for example that Iron Duke ate a nice 6 pens and a huge chunk of damage. Angle though, you see the armor is quite nice. If you do angle the ship and play it well, you can reduce the incoming fire significantly. It does have the usual 90mm bow, which means of course that nose-in against higher calibers is going to be real nasty since you can get overmatched. But it does have a 43mm deck armor on a large part of the top deck, in fact, which means of course that HE spam isn't going to be quite as effective, especially IFHE or 155, 152mm HE spam that you face a lot. Isn't going to be as strong against you, which is of course quite nice and very useful. At this point, though, the enemy has 840 points, so while I could probably beat these guys just by simply kiting and spamming HE backwards and trying to burn them to death. The problem here is that the enemy has 900 points and we only have 145. If I start running now, especially since they have epicenter control, we are quite clearly going to lose this game. So I have no option but to charge in and brawl. As I said, it's not a bad brawler necessarily. Good turret traverse, consistent guns, and turtleback means that it's pretty good at it. But the problems are, of course, low health pool and not really that much armor, which means at these close ranges you're going to expect to eat a lot of big penetrations, and it kind of negates a lot of the other strengths you have, which are, of course, the great turret angles and the great concealment. But you saw when he was angled, I didn't really do much to this guy at all. Switching to HE might have worked. I do run expert loader for that reason, but I want to use AP when I do get his broadside. I'm gonna angle towards the incoming torpedo planes, which isn't too nice because he gets a pretty good volley. But you saw the angled broad's belt armor there, how much of the damage I mitigated, and my return volley does a big chunk of damage, even though for some reason I only hit one shell. Sadly though, the game does run out before I have time to finish this guy off and extend the game. Well, time doesn't run out, they reach 1000 points. So the game ends, and this was tier 5, and I feel like this kind of shows just how strong the ship still is. The Sigma, or the dispersion nerf hurt it a bit, but the Sigma nerf compensated a lot, and it's in my opinion, a very strong ship right now. I do think it might still be a bit, I mean, it is too strong. Let's if you compare it to something like the New York, I can straight up say that I think that this ship is too strong. I mean, looking at the detail or team score here, you can see that I scored more XP than their #1 player. So even on the losing team, I beat them. So I would say against equal competition, the Giulio Cesare is, I would say, too strong. Pretty much, absolutely. I have a hard time debating this. The combination of speed, concealment, and firepower and HE fire chance all means that this is an extremely strong ship. However, considering how terrible tier 5 matchmaking is these days, it kind of needs it, because you end up against so much tier 6 and so much tier 7, and something that feels strong at tier 5 doesn't really feel nearly as strong when you're up against New Mexicos and Fusos and or even worse, you got Nagatos and Colorados and King Georges and whatever else fighting against you, who pretty much bounce all your shells and force you to only use HE. I would say though that for the sake of balance, the fire chance should be reduced from 35% to 30%. Wargaming needs to stop encouraging this brain-dead HE spam. I like the idea of HE being viable. I'm perfectly on board with that. Someone angles against you, you switch ammo type and you're able to still do somewhat punishing damage to him. But if he angles, he should be able to actively reduce the damage he takes. That's rewarding him for good playing. And in return, when you switch to HE and you start fires, that's rewarding you for good ammo choices. But when you run around shooting nothing but HE at everything, well, the guys who angle against you, they don't get rewarded in any way, and it's not really rewarding good gameplay in terms of you racking up damage. It's more like rewarding brain-dead gameplay. So, a bit too high still, the 35. Reduce it down to 30, and I think the ship is in a pretty damn good spot. Overall though, I like the changes. I mean, detailed report. This game I actually only shot AP, kinda, I guess, prove a point. But then again, against lower tiers you can get away with shooting mostly AP. I will try to see if I could get another game against tier 7s where I can show off just how it deals with higher tiers, which of course, not unexpectedly, is a lot harder, especially because of the lower HP pool. But fundamentally, I like the ship. It's a ship I will recommend. If you like tier 5s though, keep in mind, if you like tier 5s, you can't use this for operations. It's unlikely to be seeing any ranked, but if you just want a really fun and quite strong tier 5 Italian battleship, that looks amazing by the way, I love the looks of this ship, then the Giulio is definitely recommended. But the fire chance could use a bit of toning down, but very strong ship, very strong ship. Anyway, let me move on to my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, I will start with the modules. Not much to talk about here. Of course, recommend premium repair and heal, since you are playing a premium ship, so you should be able to afford it. Upgrade-wise, main armaments mod 1, followed by AA range, since these other two are pretty much not worth it at all. You have so little secondaries and the range is only 4 km, so buffing them feels kind of pointless, and main battery of course screws with your reload, so you don't want that one. So it pretty much only leaves the AA guns mod as the only viable option in this case. And damage control for additional tankiness, as you usually run on battleships because they don't lose rudder or steering that often. I mean, engine or steering that often. Captain perks wise, I've gone with the pretty basic, in the sense I haven't gone for preventive maintenance because I don't actually find myself losing the turrets that often. I feel I've gotten away with running priority target quite easily. Followed by AR. The turret traverse is so great that I don't think you need expert marksman, and superintendent for the additional heal, and stealth for that tankiness. Of course, with low tier being so infested by Royal Navy battleships these days, you want to spec for fire prevention as soon as you get 14 points. And with the 15 point, I've got an expert loader because, well, this ship excels at switching ammo type. The fire chance is still, in my opinion, a bit too high at 35%, but as long as it is this high, it of course means that switching ammo quite often is highly recommended, especially when facing higher tiers where the fire chance is very, very valuable. And now, you could run the expert marksman as well for faster turret traverse if you got additional points. It certainly wouldn't be bad. With the last 4 points though, AFT, see, I don't really see the point because I think your AA isn't really strong enough to justify running it. So with the last 4 points, maybe vigilance plus preventive maintenance, or alternatively expert marksman and maybe high alert for faster repair. That would maybe be my optimal build towards the end. Overall though, you could even go basics of survivability with all the HS spam. That I don't really see it as being that necessary though, because with your great concealment, you should be able to disengage whenever necessary, and you don't really need to go fully into the anti-fire build. But that is my recommended build for it. Flag wise, I of course recommend the very basic flags. Let me show you the camo. I did show it last time, but I do love the way this ship looks. I think this camo, the default camo on this ship looks absolutely amazing, and this is one of the things I actually do really love about the Giulio, is that it's a very, very good looking ship. I really love the look of the ship, the lines, the design, even the camo, everything about the ship looks amazing. But the bonuses are of course only plus 30% since it's a tier 5, so keep that in mind. Flag wise, I'm just running money flags, not that I need money because I don't feel like wasting any other on a previous ship. The two recommended are of course November Foxtrot for faster heal and repair, and of course better heal with India Delta. And if you got them to spare, you can run reduction in fires, very useful with all the HE spam, but other than that I don't see too many really necessary flags. I just want to expend money in general, since this is of course a premium, so that's kind of what you want to use it for. Anyway, that was my Giulio Cesare preview, or first impressions, or second impressions, whatever. They have changed the ship. They did nerf the dispersion, but they buffed it by giving it a nice chunk of Sigma. Is this ship maybe a bit too strong for tier 5 still? Perhaps. But considering how terrible the matchmaking usually is at tier 5, even though I got really, really lucky when I tried to test it and kept getting tier 5 matchmaking, most of the time you kind of need it, because when you get up tiered, if you don't have a really strong tier 5, then it's kind of a suffering. Like for example, I don't mind being up tiered in the Congo, because I think the Congo is a fast and strong ship, but being up tiered in, for example, the New York is just a massive pain in the ass, and since it is a tier 5 premium, it kind of does need a bit of an extra kick. Of course, it does make the life of the New York even worse, because, well, that poor ship is kind of being trampled into the mud with the way everything is growing and getting stronger around it. But that is, of course, another problem, and that's a problem for another time. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it.